it's so interesting because social power, if you look at it, and I'm going to show you the Wikipedia definition, which Wikipedia as a clinician is not my first go-to spot, but I found very little actually on social power in children. Welcome, you've missed nothing, just social power. Okay, so every child experiments with social power. Every child has tried to gain power over others and have had others try to gain power over them, even in friendships. So you can have social dynamics come up in friendships where someone, is a close friend and maybe you're part of a group of 3 and suddenly you realize that they're sort of making moves without your agreement, and that's a form of social power. But basically, we think of it as either equal or unequal. And you should have copies of the PowerPoint, Cognitive Distortions handout, and then a handwritten, double-sided one from me. That is a chart we're going to look at. Okay, so as parents, we have to really help our children navigate these dynamics. And I'm going to explain why it's so important. We really want it to support and build and sustain self-confidence. And as we'll talk about, self-confidence is pretty much one of the most important things we can have our children develop to prepare them for adulthood. And our goal as parents is to help our children become confident, assertive, and resilient adults. Okay, so it's often not addressed, and here's this Wikipedia definition. So in social science and politics, power is the ability to influence or outright control the behavior of people. The term authority is often used for power, perceived as legitimate by the social structure. And this part we're going to talk about because this whole perception of if you're perceiving someone, and that actually gives them the social power, right? So we're going to really dissect that. Okay, so when one child acts like the authority over the other, it can be direct put-downs, it can be insults, criticisms, it could be excluding, it can be leaving out, it can be either overt or subtle. It can be in the context of a friendship, like I said, sometimes often 3s are really 1 and 2. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't have our kids hang out with 2 friends. It just means that we might be having a conversation at some point about social power. So ideally, our children participate in friendships that have equal power with the qualities of mutual respect. So I respect you and your preferences and your opinions. You respect me and my preferences and my opinions. And mutual generosity. I give to you, you give to me. We like this, it makes us happy. But often children will be excluded or dismissed, and they'll maybe be bullied or teased or made fun of. And in this case, kids are then assuming power over the other child by doing this. So as soon as a child decides to tease or bully or say something that's derogatory, that's a social power move. So they're trying to put the other person down, and then the dynamic, which should be equal, becomes unequal. So it's asymmetrical. And the other child who has done nothing, which is really important, appears to have less power compared to the one who's assuming power. So if the other child, who's being now at the bottom of the asymmetrical dynamic, doesn't do anything, so example, the old age advice of just ignoring it. So if someone's bullying you, just ignore it. That actually doesn't work. And it also doesn't help correct the social power dynamic. So you have kids who are doing the right thing. They're being told by their parents, by the school counselor, by everyone, just ignore the bully, ignore this kid. And it's just continuing on and on. So we really have to challenge the dynamic. And we have to learn to teach your child how to assert their rights, because they have the right to not be spoken to this way. They have the right to go to school and not have other kids make fun of them. They have the right to sit where they would like to sit in a lunchroom or play on the soccer field during a recess. So this idea of walking away, ignoring, it doesn't undo the dynamic, and many times it ends up hurting their confidence. And this is where everything starts to shift in my mind, because if this is happening and it's affecting their self-esteem, now we have a problem, right? Because then it's like our child is really being hurt. So they have to learn what to say, how to say, and what to do. And it's really a skill to be taught. So just like we teach all these other skills about study skills and homework skills and keeping up with exercise and eating, we have to really do this social power skill because it's so important. Okay, so this is what we're going to go back to later. But the social structure, which is your child, if your child doesn't perceive it, meaning the social power move, as legitimate, then they're able to rebalance it and make it equal. So this is really important to teach our kids, that just because someone has assumed power over you, it doesn't mean they have power. We give them power by not challenging the dynamic. Okay, while your child didn't invite this, once it's there, they have a choice on how to handle it. Do they accept this power as legitimate or not? And this is where we really come in as parents. Okay, so other than this dynamic being pretty awful, when your child comes home from school and says, listen to what happened at recess, and it's so distressing, and it's causing a lot of pain for them, addressing it head on and in a strategic way really helps them develop these skills that are needed for adulthood anyway. So we sort of have to welcome this challenge, just like we don't really grow when things are going smoothly in our lives. We only grow when we have challenges and we have obstacles to overcome. This is one of these that it's definitely going to come up, and when we help our child through it, then they can really grow. Okay, so I always like to think about, because I love working with kids, why are we working with kids and what are we trying to basically correct or fix so that when they're in adulthood, they're in good shape? So there's sort of 4 things that we want to have in adulthood, and this is all empirically supported, which means that research has shown that these things are key in terms of lower anxiety, lower depression, rated more happy, greater satisfaction in life. All right, so self-esteem is related to the greatest amount of happiness in adulthood, and that is also rated as higher success with with work and with relationships. So self-esteem is almost the most important thing. And greatest satisfaction in life, that's exactly what we want from our kids. Okay, grit, which is stick-with-itness, not giving up. It's highly predictive of success in life. And there's a great TED Talk by Angela Duckworthy on grit. The book is lovely, but the TED Talk is lovelier. I got the book, I was like, this is like the TED Talk, but in 400 pages. But it really is more predictive than intelligence, than where you go to school, all kinds of stuff. So grit is very important. Welcome. Okay, and then resilience is highly related to well-being and lower mental health issues. So resilience is your ability to not fall down when obstacles come up. So you work through obstacles, you don't let things stand in your way. It's related to grit, but it's its own separate category. And then internal locus of control, which we're going to talk about in detail, it's really essential for well-being, and this is when you feel like you have some control over the outcome of a situation. And we know that external locus of control is highly related to depression. Okay, so parenting, and we're going to go through all of these a little bit more. Parenting goals need to be aligned with fostering and maintaining self-confidence, promoting grit, helping children cope with failure and obstacles to develop resilience, which is why, again, we want to welcome failure and obstacles, right? And then developing an internal versus external locus of control. So you're sort of thinking about these things in your day-to-day life, right? During your everyday interactions with your child, you're really trying to emphasize these things, and there's so many opportunities to do so, especially around the topic of social power. Okay, so self-confidence allows one to stand up for themselves and their rights, but also it's developed by doing that. So it's like this courage comes after slaying the dragon. So I find out, that I can kill the dragon, and then after that I know I can do it. So self-confidence develops in part from taking those necessary steps, those action steps around sticking up for yourself. So we also have to really believe in our child and support them and be on their team and not shame them or blame them in general, but particularly around these dynamics of social power as well. And I think a lot of times I hear these examples where parents are emphasizing the right things like etiquette and being polite and treating others how you want to be treated, and those are very important values and very healthy values, except when we're dealing with social power situations, it actually disempowers the child because they're applying these values to situations that it doesn't work. It has nothing to do with them. We'll talk more about that, but strategies-wise, most of these kids I work with are sweet, loving. Yes, for the people watching at home, this idea of are there gender differences around what's being encouraged of girls versus boys, and is there a little bit more emphasis for girls to be polite and to maybe put others' needs first? Yes. Big theme. Okay, so Okay, and then the stick with itness, by having our children stick with commitments, keeping work, keep working at it. You've probably heard about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. If you haven't, I can explain it. And anyone not know about Carol Dweck and mindset? Okay, good. Everyone knows about mindset. Okay, but this whole idea of sticking with it and believing that with extra work and harder work and more of a commitment, we're going to figure it out, right? Okay, and then resilience comes from dealing with failures and not letting obstacles stand in the way. So grit's often involved, but the characteristic of being resilient has a lot to do with lower anxiety and depression. So when we look at, and sorry that cut off, when we look at resilience and we research it, we find that the more resilient kids have lower levels of anxiety and lower levels of depression. And that's why, really, I work with predominantly people with anxiety disorders, adults and kids, and treating anxiety, why it's the most wonderful thing in the world to do, is that you're helping kids build resilience. So that's the silver lining of having an anxiety problem that you have to deal with in childhood, is that you now have to overcome this thing. There's no way out but through. You do it, and suddenly you realize what you're all about. And I've treated kids with that I've perceived. I treated this boy, it was one of my first phobias, with snake phobia, which you'd say, like, why would you go to therapy and spend thousands of dollars to treat a snake phobia? But he, in fact, encountered snakes a lot. His friend had a snake. Oh, sorry, I thought you had a question. And he also spoke with some park ranger that said snakes smell like cucumbers. So he was disgusted and had a gag response to cucumbers. He would be outside playing, and if he heard rustling in the leaves, he would think it's a snake when it was like usually a squirrel or a bird. Anyway, this kid was just the most confident kid ever, and his parents were, they went to like the Amazon on trips, and they were real outdoorsy people. And anyway, so I saw him for about 10 sessions. We faced his fears. We went to the zoo together. He was 12. And he took the metro by himself to the zoo. And I was like, where are your parents? And he's like, no, I took the metro here. I'm like, by yourself? I was so amazed with this kid, just super confident. And then we went to Petco together, and we had a snake taken out of the cage, which the woman was very annoyed about, because she was like, don't you want to touch it? We're like, no, that's because our exposure list on the top was just to be near an uncaged snake. Anyway, he graduates. Fast forward about 6 months later, I run into his dad in the mall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how is he doing? And he said, I would have described my son as the most confident. Like, that was just something we never had to worry about. But once he overcame his phobia, then we saw just how self-assured and self-confident, and a humble kid too, but just really that anxiety about what he couldn't do created this self-doubt. And when he overcame it, his confidence just improved tremendously. So you just want to think differently when our kids have problems and we work through them. This is all in the service of developing resilience. Okay, internal locus of control. So think about the word locus as location. So I either think that the control is inside of me, internal, or I think it's outside of me, external. If I have an internal locus of control, I'll believe that there's something I can do to affect a situation, or at minimum, my experience of the situation. An external locus of control is when you feel that no matter what you do, doesn't matter. The situation can't change. The outcome won't be different. My efforts don't mean anything. An external locus of control really sets one up for depression. And the research on this is that learned helplessness stuff. No matter what I do, I'm not going to get any better. So this is where the strategies and the techniques and the right attitude come in. We want the orientation to be, what can I do differently? Even if I can't change the situation, what can I do differently to change my experience of the situation? How can I think differently, or how can I approach this differently? So I might not necessarily be a starter on my basketball team or baseball team, and I might be sitting on the sideline and I can leave feeling defeated every time, or I can rethink that to say, you know what, this is the starting point for many people. They start at sort of the bottom, and I'm planning on making my way up, but for right now, I get to be a part of the team. I can learn, let me watch what people are doing, let me see the players who are making the best hits, what are they doing? God bless you. We can take a totally different approach than a defeated one. Same thing with, a lot of kids I work with, they are on plays, and they come back from the auditions, and they say, oh, I got a part, but I'm not happy with it, so I don't know if I'm going to do the play. And I'm like, well, what part did you want? And it's like Mary Poppins, and the play's like Mary Poppins. Well, okay, so you're a chimney person. What could be great about being a chimney person? You're still part of the production. You get to be in the music. There's so many opportunities, and it builds your resume for all the plays that you're in. But more importantly, it teaches you to stick with it, that the production doesn't happen if Mary Poppins is on the stage alone. The production happens when there's the chimney sweepers and everybody else. You're part of something greater. Okay, so related to internal locus of control is seeing that you have these choices and these options, and really flexibility is very key here, and flexibility in general is part of resilience as well. So having control is also related to lower levels of stress. So Bill Stixrud and Ned Johnson from Prep Matters, they wrote a book called The Self-Driven Child, and in the beginning really do a great explanation on stress and how when we feel that we don't have choices, that our stress level skyrockets. So we have to really give kids a lot of choices. And when they feel like they're in a situation where they're being mistreated by someone and they feel like they have nothing to do and they can't do anything, that's when we have to really fuel them with strategies, because it gives them those choices. And lower levels of stress allow our prefrontal cortex to work better. So that's kind of important, because our prefrontal cortex, which is underactivated if you have ADD, also underactivated if you're sleep deprived, that's where we have our reasoning skills, and we're better actually at dealing with these kinds of teasing situations if we're thinking more clearly. So it all sort of ties together: more choices, lower stress, better execution of the strategies that we're going to teach them, which I'm going to teach you to teach them. Okay, so why did I just go through resilience and grit and internal locus of control and self-confidence? Because they all relate to social power. They all play a role in this. And so when I work with the child about social power issues, we address all four. It goes hand in hand. Okay, so when someone tries to have power over you, they're experimenting with social power. If your child is told they can't sit at the table, they can't play with others, is purposely excluded, belittled, or teased, they're in the throes of social power. Your child knows it's happening. They might call them mean kids. And with friends, it causes this dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is like smoking cigarettes and reading about lung cancer, right? How can you enjoy the cigarettes when you know the risks? So how am I to care so much about my friend when I'm not being treated correctly? It makes me feel bad. And then sometimes, and this is true especially with girls, they end up feeling bad about themselves, a little bit more so. But with boys too. Okay, so I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, and cognitive behavioral therapy has a lot to offer here in the social power. So we know that a lot of kids with social anxiety have to deal with social power issues as well, because they have a hard time expressing themselves and the preferences. But CBT is the most supported approach to treating anxiety and depression, and there are these three parts: body, thoughts, behavior. And I just wanted to sort of show you, because a lot of times kids get physically anxious when they're in these social power situations, and they don't know how to deal with their breathing. They start to sometimes hyperventilate. They start to feel dizzy. They actually can sometimes get some symptoms of panic in these situations. Then they have all of these worries. You know, what if the kid is even meaner to me? What if I get a bad reputation of, of this or that? And then we're going to go through some of the thinking errors, but there's a lot of negative self-talk, like I can't handle this, I can't do it. And then there's a lot of avoidance that happens. So I find sometimes kids will be eating with a teacher for lunch. Why are you eating with your teacher for lunch? Even though the teacher's very nice, it's because it was too hard to navigate the lunchroom. It was too hard to find out who to sit with, or these kids were mean to me, so I just left. And then nervous behaviors, asking for a lot of questions, reassurance. And what we do is we teach them relaxation and calm breathing and meditation apps. And I'm going to go through a few of those. And then we really want them also to have a whole bunch of strategies on self-talk. We'll go through, understand the thinking errors they're making when they're personalizing something. That's a thinking error. They're making it about them. They're taking a negative situation and taking responsibility for it. And then we get them to face their fears. So we have to fuel them with, we'll go through stress inoculation. What do you say when someone says something to you? And then what could they say back? And then what will you say in response? And you go back and forth so they really feel prepared and well practiced. It's rehearsed. Okay, so take a look at this thinking errors handout. And everybody makes thinking errors, right? So if you're a human being, you make thinking errors, and we want to really normalize this, that we all make them. So all or nothing thinking is thinking in extremes. I only want to go I only want to play with one child. It's easier when I have my one friend over versus 2 or 3 friends or in a group dynamic. No, I don't want to go over to their house because there's going to be 4 kids there. So if one kid goes, I'm good. If it's more than that, I'm not going. That's all or nothing thinking, right? Flexible is I'm going to have a social event. Sometimes it's going to be with one person. Sometimes it's going to be with 4 people. And then catastrophizing is a lot of this what if thinking. What if everybody laughs at me? Personalization is where you take more responsibility for a negative outcome. So if someone's looking funny at you, you think you must look weird. Mind reading is when you think you know what other people are saying about you or thinking about you. So, I can tell the coach doesn't like me. What has the coach done? I can just tell they don't like me. That's mind reading. Okay, and then selective attention is when you have a belief about something. So you could say, I don't do well with new kids. When I meet kids, they don't like me. Okay, and then they'll think back to maybe 1 or 2 times when they've gone to a new situation and it hasn't gone well socially. So that's selective attention. It's all very common when you're dealing with these social power dynamics. So CBT has this problem-solving behavioral approach that involves learning how to be assertive and role-playing for practice. We call it behavioral rehearsal. And then with positive self-talk, the child is empowered to be assertive. So you might want to make some of these note cards for your child. You just buy it in a pack of index cards. They could do it or you can do it. But I can change the way I think to change the way I feel. I'm okay. Everything will work out. I can handle this. What would someone who's confident think in this situation? What would they do? I can be assertive. I can do it. I have to act based on my values. I've never regretted sticking up for myself, even if it hasn't gone well. It's really important that we don't regret sticking up for ourselves. Okay, so stress inoculation is back and forth preparation. We want to prepare them 4 times over. We want to give them an easy response, a medium response, and a really challenging sort of offensive response. And it prepares him or her to be assertive. So let me give you a good example. So, okay, so this girl is at lunch. And these other girls sit down and they exclude her from the conversation. We would want her not to ask ever to be, and I'm going to mention this, to not join. We don't want to say, can I sit here? Or can I play with you guys? Or can you be nice to me? Okay, because if I'm asking you these things, who has the power? You do. It's not my power. I just gave it to you. So we have to really understand not to give our power away like this. So I had this girl, sweet as could be, and I have to tell you, I only have the nicest kids come to me. I have like not one not nice kid. So the nicest kids come in and they're all like completely distressed because they're just going to lunch, and all of these things happen, of course, at lunch and recess, right? Where the teacher is not around and, all things go down. You kind of want to show up, but don't show up. And I have a good video clip that shows you why not to show up. It's almost an inappropriate clip, but I have to play it. Okay, so here she is, and these girls are just not paying attention to her. Okay. And so we talk about what can you do. So in the guise of joining in, she's going to go in, like scooch in a little bit, listen to what they're saying, and then she's going to make a comment. Okay, so they happen to have been talking about Shark Tank, which this is like a highly no screens family, which I fantasize about moving into their home because it sounds so peaceful. But at the same time, this kid didn't know about Shark Tank, which probably everyone in here knows about. Oh, you have to watch, it's great. So you have like 5 very wealthy business investors, and you come up with your idea, and you have to sell your idea to them, and they're sharks, and they're like really hard with you and critical. And have you ever had Brazzi Bites? Brazzi Bites, those gluten-free, that's okay. So I'm not gonna go on a sidetrack, but you should go watch tonight and get some Brazzi Bites and watch the Brazzi Bites episode. It's just these like Brazilian bread, that's dough. Anyway, that's why it's delicious. Are you Brazilian? Yeah. Do you know about Brazzi Bites?
Yeah, but I've never tried. But they say it's pretty similar.
When the sales of Brazzi Bites go up after this talk, you put them in your oven for 20 minutes and they toast, and there are these like balls of bread that are gluten-free, but they have cheese in them. Okay, so that's what they do. They sell their product. Okay, so she did not know anything about the show, yet these girls all watched it, and they talked about, hey, did you see the one on this? Or did you see the one on that? Okay, so she and I watched 3 or 4 clips, including the Brazzi Bites one, and the cupcakes in a jar, and this mensch on a bench, this little Hanukkah mensch on the because she's Jewish. And so, which is also a Bed Bath & Beyond, all because of Shark Tank. Okay, so she and I watched this in preparation for her to go in and say, hey, I watched last night. I don't know if you guys ever saw the episode on Wicked Good Cupcakes. And we prepared 3 different scenarios. So she's going to go in and talk about Shark Tank, which is a common thing they seem to be talking about. First, she's going to make a comment about cupcakes in a jar, and they're going to be like, oh, yes, should we order them? And she's going to suggest, I think we should order them for our birthdays, okay. And they were going to be receptive, and it was going to be a success. That's the easy scenario, okay? The medium scenario is they're not going to really let her chime in. They're going to almost continue to dismiss her, but what is she going to do then, right? So is she going to keep trying to talk? Not too much. So we prepare her to say, to start listening and then to make a comment about what they're saying. And she and I are in the process this whole time of figuring out, should she continue to sit with these kids? But we're going to play around with social power before we determine this. So the second scenario is she's not really included much more from her comment, but she's not necessarily further excluded, and then how she copes with that. So she's going to try, in that scenario, she's going to try to then comment on and not introduce new ideas, but try to join the ongoing conversation and then maybe ask a question, that can answer. The third is where someone actually puts her down and says, like, oh, that was a dumb episode, we're talking over here, like, leave us alone kind of thing, like, where they're really going to be mean. And then at that point, she was going to say something like, wow, I'm amazed at how rude you can be. I'm not going to sit here with you anymore, and get up and leave. So these are the preparations. I have a kid who wanted to ask a girl out to the prom, and he was extremely anxious, and I said, you have to ask her, and he's like, I don't think so, and I'm like, I'm gonna make it my personal goal that you go to the prom with this girl. We're gonna talk about your anxiety and all this stuff. So the good, easy response was she was gonna say, yes, I would be happy to go with you. The medium would be, no, I can't go with you, and not offer up much of an excuse, but sorry, I can't go with you, but it's nice you asked or whatever. And then the third would be, I can't believe you'd ask me, I would never go with you, just really obnoxious. And so we prepared. So the first one, obviously, you don't need preparation for. The second one, he was going to say, I'm still glad I asked you. Just nice, very flattering, have a good time. And then the third, he was going to say, wow, I can't believe that those are your true colors. I would never take you to the prom, and walk away, right? Because anyone who's going to be that is deserving of that response. Okay, so we went back and forth and back and forth. We role-played this over and over and over and over until it was seamless. Before I go, you want to know what she said? Yes. Yeah. So he asked her, and she said, I've been waiting for you to ask, and I know you're shy, and I thought maybe I should ask you. I said, listen, I did not plant her in your school, because that's like the perfect response ever. And then they went to the prom, and I had to force him to show me a picture. So anyway, all right. So let's go back to this power perceived as legitimate. Okay, so if the social structure, which is your child, doesn't perceive this, perceive this or treat it as legitimate, then the power is challenged. So the power doesn't exist. The power can be rebalanced, making it equal. In other words, if you put me down and I discredit you, then the put down doesn't hold weight. This is where the work and strategies come in. Kids need to learn not to allow others to claim power over them. They have to practice correcting this asymmetrical structure. So now we're going to look at the social power handout. Okay, so the first side is the non-red side. So Chloe and Allie, these are made-up names, have equal power. They have mutual respect and mutual generosity. When they hang out, they are excited to hang out. They include each other. They're saying, what do you want to do? Oh, that sounds great. I want to watch a movie too. Which movie should we watch? It's very collaborative. It's very equal. Even if there's a disagreement, I really want to watch this movie and I want to watch this. Okay, why don't we do your movie this week and next week we could do my movie? Great. There's a lot of mutual respect and mutual generosity. Okay, so now let's say there's this Patty girl and she has a lack of mutual respect and a lack of mutual generosity in the dynamic, and she claims social power by putting her down. So Patty says, you're not allowed to come trick-or-treating with me. Trick-or-treating is a big problem. Okay, you can't come trick-or-treating with us. And so suddenly, Allie, who's done nothing wrong, is now excluded because this Patty person has decided she can't come trick-or-treating with her. Now we flip it around. Okay, so we're tackling this thing. So now someone just put me down. If I leave it and I do nothing, she's got the power. Instead, I have to be taught to correct it. I have to be assertive. I have to stick up for myself. I have some kids tell me, but that's being mean. And I say, that's okay. I want you to be mean with this Patty girl who's being mean to you. I want you to meet her meanness. This is a big dilemma for a lot of the sweet kids that I work with. But the problem is that this person, Patty, is giving herself permission to be completely mean and excluding. Something that this client, Allie, she would never do that. She's not mean, she doesn't have a mean bone in her body. So it's really challenging for her to correct this. But she has to learn how to stick up for herself and how to be on that same energy level of, pushing. So I fence, I have a saber fence, and it's like this. And I do this analogy with the kids. Only once have I ever brought in fake sabers because maybe it's weird. But it's kind of like if you push this, you have to go back. You keep going like this. If you just keep going back, the person's going to get the point and you're done. So you have to have an attack. You have to go. And then you have to have strategy that if they are toward you, you then lunge toward them. So I do this a lot with the kids. I teach them they have to know how to lunge towards someone, not physically, but sort of psychologically. They have to be in that space where they feel that they can go tell somebody, you can't talk to me that way. So here she has to be assertive and stick up for herself. With eye contact, with a firm voice, not one that sounds like this, with a firm voice, and with a strong posture. She needs to be able to say, who made you in charge of trick-or-treating? Because I'm going to invite these people and you might not come. Seriously. We'll figure it out. I'll let you know. Hi. So not taking her cue, don't take her seriously, talking back, rolling your eyes, clarify what's acceptable. That's not going to work with me, but I'll get back to you on Halloween. That's like a great response because it's like if someone says, we're going to go and you can't come with us. Okay, well, I'll figure it out and I'll get back to you. It's just discounting their power completely. And it's really hard for kids to learn this. And then once they learn it, it's theirs. I cannot tell you how many times kids have come in and they've told me what they've said. And I'm like, oh my God, did you tell your mom I did not say that? Like that was way worse than I would ever say. But what happens is they really feel it. It's almost like they get permission that they can talk back. They can stick up for themselves. It's like, did you see the movie Back to the Future? Yeah. Okay, so that's a perfect example, right? He sticks up to Biff or whatever, and in the beginning they're sort of like very like typical middle class whatever, and then you go back in time, he sticks up to Biff, and then when Michael J. Fox awakens Back to the Future, he is now, everything is different. His parents look different. They're an upper class family. Everything's shifted. The dad is confident instead of lacking in confidence, all because back in the 1950s, he challenged Biff and got, his power, basically. It's actually a brilliant movie. Okay. So they have to be prepared not just to say this and it works. You have to know, again, the stress inoculation of if she says, I don't know about Halloween, I'll let you know. Well, there's nothing to let me know. You're not coming with us. She has to then be able to say, we'll figure it out like I said. She has to really have that kind of attitude. It's very hard for kids. The only way it works is practice, and I record everything. We use our phones to record voice memos. We make voice memos of how they sound. We listen back. I'm sometimes amazed when they hear themselves back. They're like, I don't sound assertive. I'm like, no, let's do it again, And we keep practicing it until it starts to be a little more natural for them. So passive doesn't work. Aggressive doesn't work, because that's also a way that the power gets maintained. If you make this kid aggressive, then you look what you've done to them. It's this cool assertive. It's the middle of the road. I'm not going to do nothing. I'm going to stick up for myself. And we're going to go through some more examples. Okay, so role plays. So, and let me give you an example with a friendship. Okay, so there's this client and she's eating lunch every day and she has these very special lunches that sound delicious. And her friend doesn't have the same delicious lunches, so she keeps taking her food. And how she does it is she says, oh, can I have some of that? And she's asking and taking it at the same time. And my client's like watching half of her lunch go away, right? It drives the mom nuts. The mom's like, I'm not packing lunch for her. And then at one point the mom starts packing extra food in there, knowing that this girl is, I said, well, actually, I think you are packing lunch for the girl because you're putting extra food in there. Like, you know, I think this is who's in control. So we taught the girl how to say, I really don't like it when people eat my food. And she said, but isn't that mean? And I said, I think you have the right to your lunch. And I think you have the right to say to someone who's making a boundary violation. So when someone puts their hand in your food and takes it, that's a boundary violation. If you want to offer it to them, there's no boundary violation. If they ask you and wait for you to say yes and then eat it, of course. But this whole idea of just sort of, you know, taking what you want or borrowing things without asking, those are all boundary violations. So we have to teach kids to say, actually, I really don't want to lend that out. I don't like lending my clothes out. I'm sorry, it's just a thing with me. Because when they lend it out and it never comes back, that's their friend having power over it. So these are in common friendships. Are we teaching our kids to be generous? Yes. Are we teaching them to be good sharers? Of course. They can do those things and still not lend out some, like their favorite sweatshirt or something. So you have to give them permission to be able to say it and say it in the right way. Right? So the girl with the food, that friend also would come over and borrow things from her all the time. And she would just sometimes bring them back. Sometimes she'd go to her house. And I asked, you know, what bothers you in your friendship? And she says, well, she takes my stuff without asking. It's a theme. And so she started with the lunch, and then her friend was very respectful. As soon as she said that, she stopped eating her food. And then she said, I also just want to let you know that I think our friendship would work more for me if I didn't lend you my clothes. And she was like, oh, I maybe should give you back your clothes then. She had like 12 items of this girl's clothes. I mean, it was really an imbalanced dynamic that this girl was really stressed about. And she would get stressed at night. She'd tell her mom, you know, there's something she has. I don't know how to ask for it back. I don't know how to get it back. And those kinds of things, it falls along the lines of social power. Okay, so we have to give the right messages. We have to not give the wrong messages. The wrong messages are, well, just ignore them. Ask them to be nice. Ask them if you can play with them. No one's playing with me. Okay, go ask them. It seems natural, but again, gives the power away. Tell them that it hurts your feelings. Don't tell them, because again, that vulnerability is not, it's not with a friend who's equal. It's with someone who is having an unequal balance. And when you show that vulnerability, we want to be able to be vulnerable with our close friends who we have equality with. But when we show vulnerability with people who could take advantage of it, it's giving them the power. Ask the teacher to intervene. So when you say it that way, out of context, it sounds like that comment is challenging the person's power.
Yes, that's what I like about it.
Me too, but I don't know the context. So could you give me like a picture of... Okay, then you have to do stress inoculation. So is she short?
Yes.
So then what would make, well, that says because you're short. And then what is she going to say back? Good. Okay, so you keep going back and forth?
I think it's brilliant, but my wife says that's stupid.
That's part of being married.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just kidding. It sounds kind of brilliant. You know, what I would say is I would say try it out. I'd say let's give her permission the next 3 times someone says, why are you, we're short. And so, what would make you say that? So, it's kind of along that mentality of yeah, and, right? So,
kind of jerk, why would you be that way to say something like that?
Or better, like, what's wrong with you that you would say that?
Yeah.
It has to be on that level of, if someone's saying she's short, it's an insult, but put down. So say, what's wrong with you that you would talk that way? Like that.
Why
So,
wouldn't you just say,
yeah.
well, why are you tall?
You could say that too. You might get a lot of more ideas. You could say, why are you so tall?
And so rude.
And so rude, and a jerk. Okay, just kidding. Don't say jerk. Okay, perfect. Right, so you're preparing this automatic, and that is brilliant really because it's, unfortunately something can come up in lots of different scenarios and it'll just be, very automatic. But that whole point is not giving the power. I'm not gonna feel bad because you're saying this question, or I'm not gonna answer your question. Say I have a growth issue. I'm not gonna answer that. Yeah, the point was that the tone, the inflection is very important, and does it come off as you hurt my feelings, or does it come off as, no, don't talk to me that way, what's wrong with you, right? The question is, do I ever get the Patty come in, the one who's actually in the example here, the one who's creating the power dynamic and putting someone else down? Yeah, so I get it in siblings also too, but when I get like a true Patty come along, she's usually in trouble, which is how she comes to my office, right? That she's had a lot of complaints, there have been a lot of problems, and so we talk about how this approach isn't working, and I really try to get her to establish what kinds of values she wants to have in her life, and then we do practices around it. So, yeah. But I tend to get, believe it or not, very few of right, which is sad. It should be that many Patties come along. Both. The question is, this amazing school psychologist who leads a group who has both the kid who's the Patty who's putting down the alley and the alley are both in group together, and how do we approach it? Do we deal with them together or do we deal with them individually? And so I actually think you do both. So you spend a little time and you say, Allie, I want you to be really more socially aware and pick up on the cues that I'm seeing. I think you might be missing them. And I want to make sure that you don't miss them, because that's why she's coming to group therapy with you, right? Is to be more savvy and socially aware. And when someone says that to you, even though it might not sound with the words that it's an insult, the way she said it sounded like an insult to me. And then I would bring Patty in and I'd say, God bless you. One of the things that I'm so glad you're part of the group, because I think this is a great opportunity to practice showing respect for others and showing generosity for others. And I think you need to get aligned with those values, and your actions need to reflect that. And she might say, yeah, but Allie's a nerd. I would never be friends with her, or whatever. And you say, I understand that, except that I'm not telling you have to be friends with her. I'm telling you have to be respectful to her, and that we need you to get practiced at that in this group. That's what this is for, right? So a lot of times that's what justifies these behaviors. Like, well, I don't like, there's something wrong with this kid. They're annoying, or they won't stop moving, or whatever. And I'm now working with them on how do we cope with noise pollution for the kid who's really loud in the classroom, or how do we cope with not liking someone or not agreeing with someone. Do we cope with it by putting them down? No.
Well, they're things to each other.
Right, and so we want you guys to thrive in your friendship. Yeah. Thriving in your friendship means we have to get rid of this junk. Yes. So, and that is, I do mention this in the high school example. The question is, how do you deal with when friends just disappear and a friend just ghosts you and you can't? They just basically abandon you. So how you deal with it strategically is you recognize that anyone who can, and this is where the self-confidence comes in, anybody who can leave you like that is someone that no longer meets the criteria of friendship for you. It's just sort of like if you have a breakup in college and you can't believe your relationship ended, and then you realize, well, I can't be with someone who could be without me, right? It's the same guys. That it's like if she could just be without me as a friend, then I guess it's not the friendship I hoped for, and my friendship is too valuable. I offer so much as a friend that I can't put my energies into someone like that.
Little follow-up. What
Please.
if it's dangled?
Even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I need consistency from friends. I like authentic, consistent friends who treat me the same no matter who is around or what situation takes place. So if I'm only getting invited to my next door neighbor's house when there's no one else to play with and I'm 8th on the list, unless she's 8th on the list for me, I'm not playing with her. I'd rather play alone, actually, because it would protect integrity and confidence. So we give our kids these things, and sometimes kids are just like, but I don't want to play. I want to play. I have fun. Okay, but there's a risk associated with this benefit also, right, is the messages. The question was, what do you do when someone is just obnoxious, they're unkind, but your child is confident, they see the situation clearly, it's not a threat to their ego, it's not a threat to their confidence, it's not threatening to them, it's a nuisance, and they can just dismiss it, or they could just be like, it's something I have to deal with because we're in the same classroom together, but I'm not going to challenge it because it's pointless. I would agree with that, mainly because your child is not suffering as a result. It's when you're... That's the key. Such a great, perfect comment that I'm revising this PowerPoint, and I'm going to add that in because this is my first time making this PowerPoint. I shouldn't say that, but I've given like hundreds of talk on anxiety. I'm like, I wrote this PowerPoint. I was so pumped up on Sunday. I'm like, we're talking about social power. Okay, so I'm going to add that in because if it is not causing an interference for your child, if your child's integrity is maintained for them, they feel, this is just how this kid is, there's no reason to start with interacting with them, right? But it's when your kid comes home and says, I got really upset today, listen to what so-and-so did on the playground. That's when we have to, great question, yes. The question is, what do we do when we want to not let the message of grit backfire, right? And have kids do too much. It backfired on me. I had an au pair that I should have gotten rid of, sadly, 3 days in, and she stayed 3 months. And someone said, I think you have too much grit. I'm like, me too. It was not good. It was awful. It was like outside of my house more than inside my house. But the idea is we want kids to feel empowered to say, I'm done with this, or this isn't good for me, right? In alignment with that confidence and that permission and that internal locus of control. And the grit part comes in for kids who need the grit part. So those are the conversations to say, like, look, this kid keeps bothering you. Let's not give up on this. Let's keep finding solutions. Let's keep trying different approaches. Yes, that's a great question. So the question is, when your child has this person who's calling all the shots and has the higher power, but it's done in a positive way, not in a mean way, right? It's like, this is what we're going to do, guys, and this is how the plan's going to go. Let your moms know, let your dads know, right? So what I think the conversation with your child is say, look, I think it's so great that you guys all have fun together. I would like you to organize and you plan what you guys do next. So empower him to be in a leadership role and make the plan, because ultimately that will help with the balancing. And you could say, I think it's important in friendships that there's this dynamic of mutual generosity, mutuality, where we're gonna do what you want and we're gonna do what I want. And he might say, but I'm happy with all the decisions he makes. He knows all the fun things to do. And you say, okay, then I just want you to have a couple times where we're making sure that you have those qualities too, that you can organize the plan. Okay, right. So the question is, across cultures, can we encourage the same thing in every child, or should we be respectful that some cultures do it differently, right? So I think we have to really encourage a lot of awareness about cultures and how other things are done in other cultures and not be pushing people in that way. We have a situation where my friends, because of their culture, they're not comfortable with sleepovers. And my son's he's in 4th grade, has been going on sleepovers since last year, or end of 2nd grade. And he's like, I don't understand what's wrong with them. And I'm like, wow. And he's a very sweet, perfect child, of course. I said, well, there's nothing wrong with them. And he's like, but what's wrong with sleepovers? They're the best. I'm like, I understand, but that doesn't fit for them, like from their culture. They don't send their kids out to other kids, It doesn't even occur to him because it's so normalized with his friends. But I said, the bottom line is this. You have different friends for different reasons. Some friends are going to be the sleepover kind. Some are going to be the great hangout times. Do you have the best time every time you're with them? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, it ends at 9. It's okay not to have everybody sleep over. But more importantly, we're not going to pathologize the family because they don't feel comfortable. So the awareness has to come when there's a judgment. Yeah, this is a great question. So the question is, when you have a processing issue and things are happening and you're sort of taking it in maybe, and then later realizing what happened.
Laughing in 1 minute, but really he'll come home and he'll tell me the story 4 hours later, and I'll be like crying.
He's crying, right? So number one, I think these quick comebacks, these one-liners, like, okay, whatever, I don't know what you're saying, like with an attitude, just like a quick. That could even be it. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, just kind of quick and with the attitude in it. And then that will relieve the anxiety that he said something, and then maybe he buys him a little time to respond. And then with this kid, so the most important thing is to process his feelings, right? And to say, that would make me really feel sad and embarrassed. Were those feelings you had, or what came up for you? And if he has trouble putting words to his feelings, that's when you could offer up.
Yeah. He was sad and he was embarrassed. He was like, I thought we were friends. Like, he's so confused by it.
Yeah, and say, but it is confusing because it sounds like other times he's acted like a friend.
Yeah.
But now you see, this is like, you get to see the full range of him. You know, he's showing you his whole self, and he's showing you that he's got a not nice side too. And the next time that you see him, you know, and he acts like that, say, wow, I didn't realize you were such a, you know, a mean kid. I don't know if you could sit here with me. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to let you sit at my table anymore. Like just that sort of opposite, right, of, yeah, we're not going to sit with you. You know, and I give you a quick example. When my oldest one was in first grade, this was my first introduction to social power. He came home and he said, Mom, you know, I don't understand Dylan. You know, I admire him so much, and he doesn't admire me back. And I was like, before I start crying, let's have a conversation about social power. You know, and I'm like, what do you mean he doesn't admire you back? He's like, well, he told Gabriel, you know, don't play with Isaac, he's mean. And I'm like, okay, so after my Xanax, no, just kidding. Half kidding. I called my husband and I said, we have an issue. And he's like, what do we do? I'm like, I do not know. And he says, well, what if I was at a talk and I asked the question? I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what you got to do. You got to create a scenario. This is how it goes. So I said, you have to create a scenario where you role play this and you practice this and it becomes natural and intuitive. And we're going to start with the role plays, and Isaac is going to be the Dylan, the aggressor. So that's how you always start these role plays out, where you have the kid, because you don't want to make it a shaming experience. He's now Dylan, and I'm Isaac, and my husband is Gabriel. And we basically taught him that when Dylan would say to Gabriel, we're not going to play with Isaac, he's mean, that Isaac had to go in and look right at Gabriel and say, I don't like how Dylan's talking. If he keeps saying this, I don't think we're going to play with him anymore. And this poor Gabriel just went along with whoever was telling him whatever. So he's like, okay. And when he did this, and we practiced it, I'm not kidding you, this happened, we had this conversation on Friday, we practiced Saturday, Sunday, and then we also practiced on Monday because it was indoor recess, and this didn't happen in indoor recess. So on Tuesday, finally, it was his first chance to actually say this, and he did it with a good amount of assertiveness. He like took Gabriel's arms and he said, I don't like how he's talking. If he's going to do this, we will not be playing with him anymore. And then Dylan comes and says, no, wait, no, we can all play together. The power dynamic shifted immediately because that was first grade. That's very easy, you know. And then you fast forward though, and basically it's these recurring situations where you have to sort of teach. It's all about learning how to be, you know, sort of socially savvy, and what do you say in these situations. But it's getting him to be able to say these things like, I don't know if I'm going to sit with you, so I don't know what you're talking about. You know, really preparing. There was another question around here. Yes. The question is, at what age are we becoming helicopter parents when we're doing role plays with our kids and when we're very invested in their outcome? And I do think being too involved in knowing every little nuance that happens during the day doesn't serve anyone, because it gives power to that, right? So if we're having, you know, constant comments like, you know, so how did lunch go today or something? Or what did anything happen in recess? Not good, because it's basically setting us up for, like, we're sort of scanning this problem, and we make it more of a problem when we give it attention. But I do think that most of the time we want our kids to come to us. And when they come to us and say, I'm having a problem. Okay, now in this dynamic where your child comes back and says it didn't work, you guys don't know what you're doing, at that point you say, you know, listen, I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but I know we have to keep trying, and let's try a couple of other ways. But I'm not guaranteeing my outcome. I just know that it's good to try different things, and let's see where we're at. And we're going to talk about that also too. Okay, so the right message is to put label to it. This is a game of social power. You have to be assertive and stick up for yourself. Dismiss the other child's attempt to have power by challenging it skillfully, and be willing to find new kids to play with. So the Harvard Business School #1 rule of negotiation is being willing to walk away from the table, right? So, you know, when you're at the car dealership and you're like, I'm walking, which actually happened to me once, no one followed me out. I'm like, I guess I'm not buying my car from this dealership. I could have sworn that they would come out here. You know, very dramatic. And I did it by myself too. So I was like really annoyed because I was alone and not wondering. So anyway, but they have to be willing to say these friendships aren't working for me. I'm not going to keep trying with these kids. I'm going to have to find other kids. And I've had kids that have not had quality. I have this girl, she just went to college, and her whole high school experience, people were nice to her. She was good, but she didn't have her friends in high school. She had her friends outside of school. And it was hard for her. But she said, I'm here for a reason. We offered her to switch schools. She said, this is my academic environment. This is where I want to be. I hope that college I'm going to have a better social experience, but we had a conversation, ongoing conversation, as did her parents, about it and how this doesn't reflect who she is. And, it's good that she's not trying to fit in with these kids who are pretty rejecting of her. Okay, so we don't give our power away. We don't ask to join. We already reviewed this. When you ask someone to be nice, they have the power to be nice or not, and instead you have to demand of them, don't talk to me that way. I don't want to hear this from you. Enough. Okay, you have to help the people pleaser, the sweet, sensitive kid, all the kids that we love, to go outside their comfort zone and find their voice and use it. I mean, I have this girl, I just saw her yesterday, and I told her what to say, and she goes, oh, God, you want me to say that? And I was like, 15 times on your phone, get it out. And we did it. And she has been, magical. 6th grade, it's all working out. She totally freaks out in my office when I suggest these things. And then partly because she's a people pleaser, she's doing it. And then she comes back and she's like, guess what? And I'm like, what? She's like, I have my own Halloween group. I'm like, oh. Okay, all right. So the kid is willing to insult me. I have to be able to empower myself to talk back to them. Oh, and this is also kind of interesting. So this kid's willing to insult me, and you're having a hard time talking back to them. Being able to talk back to them will not make you less of who you really are, because they feel if I act mean, will I be mean? And it actually makes you more of who you are, because it's that confidence. Yes. So the question is, what do you do when the child is saying, well, I don't talk like that, and now you're asking me to say these things, and the other kids talk like that, they're used to that, but I'm going to end up getting in trouble because I'm now saying what the other kids are saying. Okay, so at that point then, I think that's when your child has to say to the teacher, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I'm working on making the power more equal in my life. Like, I literally think they have to call it out as it is. I've had the other situation where I have had kids who need help and haven't been able to ask for questions because they haven't been assertive. And then when they ask for questions, the teacher's like, we don't have time for questions. Oh. And I have to prepare my child. What I want to do is call the teacher and say, can you please answer the questions? But I really try not to. I do call when they're younger, but when you're in middle school and up, I try not to have too much to do with that because I want them to be able to be assertive. So I'm now having her say, actually, I can't move on until I get this clarification. And then sometimes the teacher explains it she can't understand. And then my client has to say, I'm really sorry, can you please rephrase that? I'm not understanding your explanation. And yeah, maybe the class has to wait another minute. But, so I could see that as happening. But I think you have to give language around that if they get called out from the teacher. The question is, what do we do when, in this case, our child does act out and has sort of had this aggressive move because they took it for so long? And I think it's great that you praised him, and then I think moving forward it needs to be, so let's rewind and what could we have done? How could I have helped you differently too, kind of address these things. In friendship, we have to be able to be ourselves and give feedback when needed. So if someone's doing something that we don't like, we have to be able to say it and language it the right way. Okay, so now I'm going to give you some examples. I'm just popping ahead here. Okay, wait. So I wanted to show you this clip, which I should have showed you by now, but okay. It's a little inappropriate.
Hey, you.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, I'm Sadie's mom.
Sadie.
Sadie, the one you chat with on the internet?
Nah, man, that ain't me.
Well, it was you. I saw your picture. Did you make a hot list and not put Sadie on the hot list?
She was not on my list, no.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make my own hot list. And you know what? You're on the not hot list. How does that feel?
Doesn't bother me. I'm comfortable the way I am.
Maybe you shouldn't be so comfortable with yourself. You know why? You look like a miniature Tom Petty. How's that feel, huh? You think that haircut's cool? It's not. Looks like you put your Justin Bieber wig on backwards. You still comfortable with yourself? Why are you wearing a tank top, huh? So you can show off your little bald pits, you little hairless wonder? cool tank top, man. Huh? So next time you think about writing something nasty on my daughter's Facebook page, just remember me. Remember me. I will come down here and I will f you up.
And then he starts crying and then she feels bad. So don't you want to, should come up, don't you want to sometimes if you hear someone's really being mean, like this bus person, you want to do something like that, right? And that's the conversation you have either with your partner if you have one, or your best friend, but not your child's bully. And certainly, right, you don't directly call the parents of the child that's hurting your child at school emotionally. You don't do that because it's our instinct. It actually makes everything worse. And it doesn't empower our child to learn what they have to learn. And, I'm sure everyone's had this. I did this in second grade. I called the mom and my husband threatened to, and I was like, I think I should be the one to call. Because he had kicked him like 3 times or something at like a Shadowland party or whatever. And the mom was great on the phone, and then I saw the mom at like a school event, and she literally like looked down and ignored me, and I was so uncomfortable, and I was like, okay, this is why. And I didn't take my advice. You don't deal with the parents. You teach your child, because that's the way that your child is actually going to be able to be empowered. Okay, so this is an example of the bus, and here's don't do it for them. So if your child is being teased on the bus, they should say, I'm going to need to get your name because I don't know if you're going to be allowed to ride this bus anymore with the way you're treating me. And really, when you call and just as you said, the consequence would you be driving, that actually has happened to kids that I know where they have said, what's this kid's name? They found out, one from a counselor said, what's the kid's name? And the counselor said, that's so-and-so, and he called out from the window, I got it. James McLean or whatever, and that's not his name. And then they called in the camp, and then the kid was suspended from the bus for 3 days. So it gives a lot of power when you can do. So sometimes in those environments when you're kind of victimized on this bus, there's no place to go, you have no mobility, you have to stay seated, and you're taking all of this. When you take action like that, it's actually quite helpful. Okay, and then this whole Halloween thing, and I don't like to be gender stereotyped speaking of gender stereotypes with sports and boys, but there can be a lot of, no, you can't play with us, or we already have enough people playing. And we really have to teach them, to sometimes be the first person on the basketball court at recess and start throwing baskets with another kid. And then when the other kids come to say, we'll let you use it in 5 minutes. It's like invading the space that these other kids think. So you're just trying to strategize with these little steps, and same thing with the Halloween costumes. Now, there's a lot of people that wear costumes along with their friends. They all wear. This is like, I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation in my office in the last 3 weeks of like, what are we going to be and who's going to be in the group that is sharing the costume? So how do you handle that if your friends are all wearing the same costume and you're not invited to wear that costume? Okay, so what do you do? So, and they're your friends. So you pick your great costume and you say, guys, I love your costumes. You all look really great. I have an idea for next year that, I might let you guys know about. Right? But it's really showing that you're not being affected because that there's some strategy there that they're not letting you in, and you want them to sort of essentially feel bad that they haven't included you. But if you do it in an aggressive way, it'll just confirm their decision that we feel good we didn't ask you to be in our costume group. And then with social media. Okay, the research on this is like, oh my goodness, coming out more and more and more. So social media is really related to higher anxiety, higher stress, higher depression. Like, we should be counting our lucky stars that we did not grow up with Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and all the stuff. The problem is it's very hard to say you can't be a part of this because that's in some ways putting your child to a disadvantage. But we have to create realistic expectations and understanding. I have this boy that he was not at a party and his friends were all, it wasn't a party, it was like a hangout at this kid's house, and they took a picture, and he has OCD, so it certainly didn't help that he had this photo then that he can look at over and over and over. And I said, aren't these kids like really all close friends? I thought you said like 2 of them you're really closer to. He's like, I am. I said, okay, just for fun, can you do me a favor, like sometime in the next month or something, can you take a picture with kids you don't really know and let's see how it turns out. So he was at some game event at school, and he took a picture with him and these other kids that he was not friends with and posted it. And it looks like they're the best friends in the world, and they're not. It's like those celebrity, like Kate Hudson's next to like Taylor Swift, and they're like BFF. And then in the article, Taylor Swift is like, yeah, I just met Kate Hudson that night sitting next to her at the Lakers game. It's constructed. It like makes this image of things that is not accurate. It's our job to let the kids know this is not reality. It's a virtual reality, honestly. We have to put limits on it. We have to say that, you don't make comments on your friend, on their, Instagram feed when that friend has been mean to you. You don't write all these compliments to your friend, because that's another way of sort of giving power. Friendships groups, these often change from 8 to 9. I have a lot of kids that suddenly their friends are not their friends anymore. They're in 9th grade. They have to make a new set of friends and use the same kind of motto, which is that if my friendships haven't sustained from 8th to 9th, then these are not the friends I expected them to be or hoped they would be. And now I have to find real friendships as if I'm new to the school. And then I had this give the finger example, very inappropriate. I had this kid basically bullying guy, 11th grade, every time he saw him would give him the finger. Okay. And he was one of the friends with many of his friends. And my client was like, I'm like, what do you do? He's like, I do nothing. And then sometimes he would take his phone and send these messages from his phone. And I was like, have you ever considered giving him the finger back? And he was like, oh, I would never do that. You can't do that. And I'm like, but he's giving you the finger. Okay. So anyway, I work with him. It sounds terrible, but I work with him on this. And this kid was really like picking on him. He would grab stuff from him. He'd take his book and like run off with it. I mean, he was really bullying him. So anyway, after a long time, like 2 or 3 months of this, finally my client, he walks up to him and he says, F you to my client. And my client, and he took his phone. He grabs his phone back and says, no. He gets in his face very loud, F you to whatever his name is. And then he gave him like both fingers. Okay, the kid literally never went near him again. He was completely scared of my client. My client went a little ballistic. Okay, but it worked well because my client for the most part is pretty passive and really scared to act this way. And he had taken this abuse and taken this abuse and taken this abuse, kind of like your example, it just came out. But it came out in a way that actually reshifted things, like, I'm done, don't mess with me anymore. So on that, I'm concluding this. Do you have any questions? Because we still have 30 seconds. Okay. This is my last slide, right? Oh, God. Okay, no, I already talked about that. I gave you the example to encourage your children to do it. Okay. I can stay for questions if anyone has questions. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.